It's me again. Eric Keller, continuing my Treehopper princess project, doing some insect-inspired sculpting. First thing I wanted to talk about today is based on a request from the last stream. Someone's asking if there's a way they could get a playlist for this entire stream, starting with the beginning of this particular project. So, what I have been doing, and I'm just starting to do this, and I will try and improve it over the next few weeks, but this is my website, Bluepatone. This is my ArtStation page, bluepatone.artstation.com, right here. And on this page, I do have a link to CG instructions. So if you click this link right here, you'll see I have YouTube playlists. I just started throwing this together this morning, so I'm going to improve it and make it a bit more organized and so on. But this is a playlist for this particular project, this Treehopper Princess, which I've been working on for the past few months. So it starts with the initial concept and block out, and then I have everything in order. And what I'll do is I'll continue to add these links because as people have been pointing out, trying to search the ZBrush live stream playlists, the ZBrush live stream archive to find these things in order is almost impossible, as it took me all morning to do. So I'm going to put up my other live stream for my other projects here so that people, if you're curious, you can go back and check them out. Everything down here is really old, incredibly old, so I'm going to kind of, this is inspiring me to actually go back and update my website, which I haven't done in a very long time. So hopefully that will be helpful to you guys. So I also posted in the description for this live stream a link to this page here. So once again, I'll show you again later on. But this is my website, bluepatone.artstation.com, or you can go to bluepatone.com, click on this link, and you'll see here's the playlist for this project. So hopefully that's helpful. I'm glad that people are interested enough to go back and see it from the beginning. I kind of like where it's going. Of course, reviewing the previous live streams this morning, it did start out as an ugly duckling, but it's starting to come together now. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to work on the hand and then this little critter right here, which is an older model that I created before in a previous live stream, but I thought I'd reuse it, repurpose it for this one. So I'm going to pose him a little bit so he's standing on the hand better, and then just add a little bit of refinement. What I did is I combined this into a single subtool right here. If I turn the solo button, you can see it's kind of unposed. And, how many polygons? 158,000, so not bad. So I'm going to work on that. This hand I think looks pretty good, aside from some fine detailing. What I might do is copy that over to this hand, which is not as refined, and then repose it. And then there's some other detailing, but she's almost done, really. Right now it's just all detailing work, so I need to, well, I guess it depends what you think is almost done. I have a tendency to get really sucked into detailing work, so I'll keep working on it until people tell me to stop. How about that? So you can see there's some other detailing I have to do right here, but watching me draw dots on something is not very interesting. Hey Philippe, thanks for joining me today, and let's get to it. So what I'm going to do is, let's do this. I'm going to hold the shift key, click on this eyeball icon to make everything disappear, invisible, except for the selected subtool. And then I want to find that hand and turn that on, and then I'll turn on transparency just so I can start to pose this a little bit better. And this should be all polygroups, so what I can do is I'm going to control shift click on this. Actually, what I'm going to do right here is let's do this. When I'm posing, I like to turn on this material since it's easier to see. And I'm going to go in here and just do polygroups, auto group, so it creates a new polygroup for every individual piece of geometry, since I'm going to make the pose asymmetrical. And then what I'll do is I'll control shift click on this, control shift click again, click on this one, Control Shift click on this, and then I'm going to do Control A to mask everything. That way it's just one way to go about unmasking this, and then I'll press W for the gizmo, and let's see, let's do this. I think I've noticed when you watch insects move, like videos of insects and everything, this is obviously not an animation project, but when I'm trying to animate insects, one thing keep aware of when you're watching them walk around is that they stumble a lot. They're not super graceful on their legs, most of them. So it's like if you animate an insect, you really want to put that animation of them sort of feeling around to find out, you know, to sort out the surface that they're walking on. Okay, I don't like that at all. It's something I don't see, you know, it's a telltale sign of CG if an insect walk is, let's go back a few steps, is too graceful. Another fun thing to watch is when a beetle in flight is incredibly awkward, especially something like, you know, the fig beetles, the shiny green ones that I used to see in Los Angeles a lot. They're just like really clumsy in the air. It's actually really funny to watch, and also when they're swimming and walking or running or whatever. I did a beetle animation a long time ago. It was an animation of a bombardier beetle, and I thought it was pretty cool. I mean, it was kind of supposed to be a goofy cartoon beetle, but entomologist called me out on it, saying that it was way too, the way that it walked was completely wrong. So maybe someday I'll go back and redo that. But part of it was because I made it too graceful. Okay. I'm going to refine this a little bit. Let's turn up mask by polygroup. I'm just going to do a quick block out, and then I'll go back and refine these a little bit more once it's blocked out, so then it looks so awkward. It's going to be just awkward enough, but I also want to make it look like it's sitting on her hand. Something like that. That one. So I'm pressing Control Shift and clicking on these to hide them, these different polygroups. Control A to mask everything. Control Shift again on a blank part of the screen to bring everything back. W for the gizmo. And let's see. Whoops. Make sure I'm going to hold the Alt key to place that gizmo a little bit more accurately. Right here in that socket. Anybody out there still pose with the transpose tool? I tended to use the gizmo much more than the transpose tool. I used to use the transpose tool all the time, but I really like the gizmo. There's some cool things you can do with the transpose tool that still make it very useful. But if I want to change like the rotational pivot, I just hold the Alt key and and drag on the rotational part, and then that changes the pivot. hold the Alt key and I can move this. Let's see. I kind of want this one sitting on the pinky there, so I'm going to Control Shift click on this, Control A to mask it, Control Shift click to bring everything back, move the gizmo over here by holding the Alt key. What I'll do is, when I finish these live streams, 'cause I usually do about 2 hours, I'll go back and add it to the playlist, and I'll add some playlists from other projects that I've done, like the Arachnid Warrior from Starship Troopers that I did a few months ago, and some of the other ones. I just realized, my CG instruction page on my website is so incredibly out of date. And it's kind of just blah, blah, blah anyways. So I'll try and put some actual useful information on there. Useful information is something that the internet used to be known for, but seems to have gone away. That's not really realistic in terms of how, because these are all elbow joints, right? So I can't have them twisted any which way. You can get a little bit of leeway, but you don't want to make it too crazy. It still has to follow a certain amount of logic. That's okay. I'll move the head a little bit so that it's not so crowded, but I think that's a little bit better than it was. And then this one, I think, shouldn't be too bad. So, Control Shift click on this once, hide everything else. Control Shift click on again, and then Control Shift click on these polygroups, and then Control A to mask everything. Control Shift click to bring it back. W for the gizmo. Alt to hold the gizmo. And I can hold the Alt key and click on this to just kind of reset the rotation. The rotational pivot, and then I'm just going to move this back like this. Might be too far out. I think that's okay. Now, Control drag and release to clear the mask. Control Shift click on this guy. Well, you could actually, sorry. With the gizmo active, I can just Control click on this. It'll mask everything else but that polygroup, and it'll also kind of snap the gizmo right to the point where I clicked. So that if you're just doing one polygroup, that's a little bit faster. Just do something like that. That looks pretty good. Let's do the other side. I'm going to Control Shift click on this polygroup once. Do it again to hide it. Control Shift click on this. Hide this, hide this, hide this. Control Shift click there. Hide this. Control A to mask. Control Shift. on a blank part of the screen to bring back the whole, all the hidden stuff, and then hold the Alt key. I can Alt click on that as well as another, is a faster way to put it into position. And hold the Alt key and position this a little bit. Hopefully I can just do this. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm going to control drag to clear the mask on everything, and then hold the control key and just click on this. That masks everything but that poly group. And then I can just rotate this. The other thing I need to get back into is posting tutorials on my YouTube channel. I had to take a break because I got swamped with work. So I will try and start to update those again soon because I have some ideas for some cool tutorials. I started doing a series called I Love Projection, or I Love Dynamic Symmetry. So you can watch those videos on my YouTube channel, which is Blue Patone. And I did that because I wanted to do something that I was really tired of seeing YouTube videos where the people are like, you're doing this wrong, or you don't know this, or mistakes that you're making. And it's like, dude, what's with all the negativity, man? Like, I'm tired of the internet telling me everything I'm doing wrong. I mean, it's just a clickbait kind of way of doing things because it takes advantage of everybody's natural insecurity or their ego. It's like, oh, I know what I'm doing. Don't tell me what I don't know. And then you end up clicking and watching the video, and it's like, ah ha ha. Then they've succeeded in trapping you. And I really can't stand that. So I wanted to do something that was a bit more positive, a bit more fun, just to pique your curiosity and say, oh, well, that's a cool feature. Why do you love it? Okay, this is why I love it, or how I use it. So being Mr. Positive in my YouTube videos, and I want to get back into that because I've been having so much fun with the iPad, ZBrush for iPad, especially the 3D scanning feature. So I'm hoping I can go out and do some more scanning and show you guys my process and just how cool it is. So I will try and do that as soon as I get some spare time. So W for the gizmo, and I'm just going to Alt click right here just to snap it. There we go. And then hold the Alt key, refine that. Hold Alt, click on that Orient button just to reset the orientation. This one's going to be a bit trickier. Doesn't have to be perfect, you know. I could have it just like this, where it's sliding off of her thumb, as long as it doesn't look too awkward. You know, or I could do this, or pull it up. I'm going to Control Shift click on that, Control A to mask it, press W, and I'll Alt click right here. Okay, so if you're going to store a hotkey, what you need to do is remember after you create the hotkey, this is really important, go into Preferences and under Config, Store Config. I'm guessing if you forget to do that, then the next time you load ZBrush, it won't load your configuration. So try that. So do your hotkey for SK cloth, etc. Save the hotkey. And then before you close ZBrush, try doing store config. See if that solves your problem, because that's the one I forget all the time. There's a few default preferences in ZBrush that I can't stand. And so every time I load a new version of ZBrush, I have to turn them off. I'll go over a few that I don't like personally. So in the interface, this enable right click pop up, I can't stand that one because the problem is that when I'm going, sometimes if I hit the button on my, of course it's not doing it now. Yeah, there we go. If I hit the button on my pen and hold it for too long, this thing pops up and I'll accidentally hit a setting and change it. So I despise that setting. So I'll turn that one off, but I have to remember config, store config. That way ZBrush will remember it next time. That's my guess about what's going on there. Hopefully that's helpful. But it goes true for interfaces and configuration as well. So like if I put my custom buttons down here in this tray, I gotta remember to hit store config before I close ZBrush, and otherwise it won't pop up there. And I believe that's true for hotkeys as well. Because you could also, in the hotkeys, you could, save them in a hotkey file and load it next time you load ZBrush, but that's kind of annoying, so try store config. Let's see if I do that. I want to do this. All these joints can get a little bit confusing with insects. This one's going to be upside down again. That's okay, I'll just change the shape. I'm going to cheat this a little bit, or a lot of it, and just change the shape here. Right now it's just polygons. No one will ever know, right? I think this still has polypaint data on it, but I deleted the higher levels of subdivision on this little buggy, so I had to redo it. But that's okay. I might make it a completely different color. It's kind of fun to reuse this model, though. I have a playlist for this guy as well. Okay, that's cool. I like the asymmetry. And then this one, I think. I could just let's see. Try to do some detailing on the inside here to make it look more interesting. I kind of like this kind of V shape right here. Control clicking on that to both add a mask to everything else and also snap the pivot. Okay. And then I think the last thing I'm going to do is pose the head here. And Control Shift click on this. All these little mouth parts. Control A to mask everything. Just move it out so it doesn't look so crowded. Even have him nibbling on her finger. And put some asymmetry just in these parts right here, the maxillary palps. Okay. That's a nice little pose. Let's take a look at the, let's save this guy. And turn everything on. Bugs who love bugs. Adds a little bit more life to the scene. A little asymmetry, a little bit of a pose. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to Control D, subdivide it, and just do a little sculpting to bring out some of the detail. Of course, since I've changed the symmetry on here, it's going to be a little bit more manual, but I think asymmetry in this detail is fine. I can see kind of where the old detail was right here. Let's get it up to, I think 10 million is excessive for this. 2 million is fine. I'm going to go to Lightbox, into my User tab under Brushes. SK Brushes, and find my SK Cloth brush. Hold the Alt key and just, that's too much the intensity. Let's do this. The one ZBrush feature that I don't use nearly enough is the stager, which is really good for posing. I have to go back and really practice with that a little bit because it is really useful. I tend to either pose manually or I'll use Transpose Master, but stager can be really useful for doing posing. There's add so many features with every update to ZBrush that sometimes I lose track of them, and either I forget about them, which has happened more than once. It happens to everybody, except for Paul Gabry. Forget about it, or just haven't used it enough to really understand how it works. And I think Stager is definitely one of those. So I just spend like an afternoon refreshing my mind on how it works, and then find some cool applications for it. Maybe I'll make that my goal for the next week or so. Also, layers are a very useful posing tool and detailing tool. There's lots of different ways to do the same thing in ZBrush. That depends on that's the whole point. Depends on your own personal approach. If you come from a traditional sculpting background, you might just do everything right there on your subtool without doing any kind of storing of layers or morph targets or anything like that. You just sculpt as if it was clay. That's totally cool. That's cool if you're doing like concepting, like this kind of thing where I'm just kind of doing like a cool scene with some interesting characters and I don't have an intention to animate or do anything other than maybe a cool rendering. If you're doing something for production, if it's an animation or something that needs to be rigged, etc., but you want to see it in a cool pose or present it to a client in a nice pose, which can be very important sometimes. You really want to get into using layers and morph targets and those kinds of things, just so you have a way of easily changing it without having to go back to an earlier version, and you can switch between posed and unposed versions. That's another thing Stager is really, really useful for. Might knock this back a little bit with the smooth brush. That's too much. I'm just going to go in here and refine these things so they don't look like just a bunch of spheres and sitting next to each other. And just sort of augmenting the detail that was already there in the previous version. You can see that the topology of this guy is a lot of quick Z remeshing, like the original. I need to go back to the real character and actually do a decent retopology, because you can see how much denser this is than this, so you get this disconnect between these different parts. They don't look like they're congruous at all, but I think for this quick sculpt it's okay. But if I do something with this character, I'll need to go back and redo that. I can take the inflate brush and beef up these spikities a little bit. The one that I really want to do is go back and do a retopology on the Arachnid warrior, so that I can maybe bring that into an animation package and animate it a little bit, pose it, do a cool rendering. That might be a nice live stream using the retopo brush to do a retopology on that particular project. So, get this. Get these to connect. I don't think I need to go crazy with the detail on this guy, because it's such a small part of the overall composition. So I don't have to go into micro detail with it. And then I want to keep it at around 2 million polygons. It's no point in going there and doing super hyper detail. Like I say, what I think I'm going to do with this is just make some nice little renders of it, of the whole composition. And if it's something I really like, maybe I'll go and do something else with the character. But I think this is just kind of my goal on this one, is just to play around in ZBrush for the live stream with something that's kind of fun and interesting. I'm going here and reading back over the comment. I tried to set a hotkey for SK cloth. I save the hotkey. Every time I restart ZBrush, it doesn't recognize the brush or any custom brush. Another problem is that ZBrush might not be loading those custom brushes when you start up ZBrush. And that could be the issue. So in that case, you're going to need to place your custom brushes in a Z startup folder so that when it loads those brushes. It's the same thing with like a lot of hotkeys to plugins and that kind of stuff. If you have hotkeys or plugins on your custom interface, then ZBrush is not going to see them when you load up ZBrush unless those plugins are already loaded. So let's see if I can find. It might be slightly different because of the new version of ZBrush, because they've changed the way that user data and ZBrush data is stored. So in other words, let's give this a try here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my SK brushes. So this is in my user folder. I'm going to go in here and turn on preferences and choose config, enable customize, and let's take SK cloth, and we can control alt drag it. Whoops, actually, sorry, that's not the way you do it. I'm going to load it, make sure it's loaded, then go into the brush palette, find it in these small icons right here, and control alt drag down here. So it's kind of a weird way to do it. So if I go in here and I choose preferences, store config, and I'm going to save the project. And then close ZBrush, and we'll restart it. So you can see that, yeah, the SK cloth brush is not loaded down here because ZBrush doesn't know where that brush is, even though it's in the user folder. So for example, let's repeat the same thing, but let's do it with the Maxon stuff. So I'll go in here to brushes, and let's just take, I don't know, nudge brush or something like that. So I'll just double click on the nudge brush. Let's load up a tool so we're in edit mode. See, it's interesting. It actually stuck it down there where I had the other custom brush. Yeah, ZBrush is weird. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to control alt drag this off somewhere. Preferences, config, enable customize. Let's just get rid of it. And I'm just going to go in here to the brush palette. Let's do like clay buildup. Control alt and drag it down here. All right. So I'll go to preferences, store config. Actually, let's do preferences, turn off, enable customize, store config. Okay. Close ZBrush. And restart ZBrush. And there's the brush right there. And that's because this is part of the startup, Z startup. So ZBrush loads this brush when it starts ZBrush, and that way it's available for my custom interface. But if I'm using a custom brush that it could be in my user folder or anywhere else in my hard drive, and ZBrush doesn't see it, then it doesn't know how to load that brush when you first start up ZBrush. So let's see. This is going to be slightly different because of the fact that they've changed the way that these things kind of operate in ZBrush. So what I'm going to do is, let's go to C, program files. Here's my custom brushes. So I'm going to take one of these. We'll do, I don't know, SK cloth. There we go. So I'm just going to copy this. And let's go to see program files. Z startup brush presets, and I'm just going to paste it right here. There we go, SK cloth, right? So now let's go and close ZBrush, reopen ZBrush. There's my clay buildup. Let's load something in here, get an edit mode, whatever, just so we have our brushes available. Let's see if it's in here. Yeah, I'm gonna have to take a look at why, how since they've changed it, where the brushes actually go, the new brushes since they changed it. There's my custom brush. This is maximum brushes. Sorry, this is starting to turn into a really boring live stream. I apologize for that. So yeah, I'm gonna have to see if I go into here, brush, load brush, SK cloth, brush presets, bring up. Yeah, it's loaded in there. So yeah, they changed the way that it works. So I'm gonna have to ask Paul Gabriel about that. But you might want to check out Paul Gabriel's live stream and ask him that question on how to properly load it now that they've changed the way that custom brushes load. Sorry, that's really terrible advice, but that's kind of the best that I can offer right now. Because normally when you put it in the brush presets as Z startup of the current version, it should appear when you load ZBrush in your brush presets, but it's not doing that for me. Try doing this real quick. Just curious to see if I can get this to work. Yeah, it's still not going to load down there. If I load the brush, though, let's see. Load my project. Into my user brushes. Yeah, no, it doesn't appear down there. Yeah, if I load the brush from that directory, then it appears down here, because it's basically a link to that brush where it is in the hard drive. So, no, that's not very helpful. I apologize for that. I'm just sculpting some detail on here to make it look a little bit more refined. crazy on the detailing down here because no one's going to see it in this particular illustration. Again, if it's an animated character, then I would spend the time going down here and refining all this detail to a higher level, but this is just for an illustration, so I'm only going to take it as far as I need to. But sometimes I can't help it. What might be nice on this part is, let's see if this will work. If I look at her, you know, I've got several different types of motifs going on here, like this dot pattern down here, as well as this sort of webbing thing right here. So it might be nice to bring some of that into this bug, even though he's a different bug. So I'm going to go to Lightbox. Try and go to Lightbox. Or is ZBrush going to crash on me? Nope, there we go. Oh, I accidentally hit the undo history. Sometimes that bar can be kind of a pain. Okay. Go into Lightbox under my user brushes. I'm going to go to single dot. I might not have enough geometry to do this the way I want to. Let's see. There we go. And turn off our dynamic brush size. And the dynamic brush size was causing an issue. Sometimes you have dynamic brush size on and you set the draw size all the way down to 1, it kind of starts to behave very strangely. So if you find that you can't get any smaller than this size, double click on dynamic to turn it off so it's no longer highlighted. And then your draw size is going to be relative to how close you are to the object, but at the same time makes it easier to make these smaller details. I think I'm not going to have quite enough geometry to do exactly what I want to do with it, and I don't want to subdivide it. But you can just put a few little Let's see if I like that. If I do just subdivide, excuse me, I can't talk. I'm going to subdivide them. Let's do this. I'm going to just bite the bullet, subdivide it up to 10 million. What's the worst that could happen, right? There we go. Yeah, that looks better. Put down the Z intensity. It's too much. Looks pretty cool. Let's save this. I might do for the wings here, these are little baby wings, is kind of reintroduce that motif I was using at the other part of the sculpt here. This stuff right here. I'm just kind of defining the major lines that I want. Of course, these aren't going to be symmetrical. In a real insect, the wing veining would be symmetrical, but I'm thinking this is sort of more of a detailing than a wing veining kind of thing. These are sort of maybe underdeveloped or underutilized wings. Pretty cool. I think for the abdomen here, let's bring out some of this detail here. If you recall, when I did this insect originally, I had this sort of fading into the abdomen here, which I think looks pretty cool, and is based on the actual katydid. Or the reference I had for the katydid when I made this, when I did the katydid. So let's see. I think I want to bring some of that dot motif into this area as well. So I'm just kind of very quickly kind of bringing out the lines here. And then we go in here and do like a quick clay polish. And then kind of smooth this out over here. And then I'll use the light box. Oops. What happened to this brush? Use the drag stamp brush type, stroke type, so it's consistent in size. Turn dynamic size back on, because if it's off, then it's not going to be consistent if I zoom in, right? I want it to be consistent, so I have dynamic turned back on. Of course, that means I had to kind of fiddle around with the draw size. Let's smooth this out a little bit. See how that looks. What I can do is this. Instead of constantly rotating it, I will get a view of the bug like this. That's this leg. I'm going to do Shift S to drop it to the canvas, and then I can use that as a guide to make this look a little bit more consistent, visual guide. Do some similar detail right here. a little bit. Got limbs poking out here, so I'm going to cheat it a little bit. Go in here and fill this in a little bit. We got some issues down here. Let's go back a little bit. just neatening up this the thorax here where the legs come out. And I'm using the mask by polygroups feature to make that a little bit easier. Moving these, they're all different polygroups. That makes it easier. And like I said before, this is really just kind of an illustration, so I'm not going to be too hung up on things like the topology or the symmetry of it. Since this is just a single pose, I just want to focus on the parts that I think are going to look good. Of course, I need to go to my clay tubes and turn on the back face mask. So I keep getting this kind of issue. And by default, clay tubes has back face mask turned off, and I always forget that. Working on these little socket areas where the legs come out. Obsessing too much about this part, which is not really visible. Let's turn everything back on and take a look at it. So what I think I'm going to do now, take a break from this little bug. I'll probably come back to him a little bit later. I'm going to copy this hand over here and change the pose just to make it look a little bit better, because I spent a lot of time with this hand last week. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the subtool. Actually, what I want to do is mirror the subtool, right? So let's give it a unique name. This is, I guess she's, oops, sorry. She is left-handed, I guess. So let's rename this. Left hand. to Z plugin, subtool master, and let's choose mirror. Mirror across X axis. I want to append it as a new subtool. Don't want to merge it. So I'll do this. So there we have it. SW for the gizmo. And whoops. That's the wrong one. I'll click on it so we have the right subtool. All right. Okay. Let's rename it. Right hand. Give us a little bit of sculpting there. I might end up doing the same thing for the arm, I'm not sure. I'm going to repose the fingers. And I'm going to alt-click on this. This is the old hand. I'm going to delete this, but always important to save before you delete, because you can't undo a delete. So delete that. Alt-click on this. And let's edit the pose a little bit. Really just need to change the pose in a couple of those fingers. Hey, how you doing, Andrew? Thanks for joining. Just fixing some of the hand issues here. The right hand. Got to reshape some of this a little bit. You read the ZBrush book. That's an old book. I think some of it still applies. I think what I'll do here is going to make the hand look more relaxed. I'm going to go back and refine the fingers a little bit more though. That's when I started to detail on it, but there we go. I think that looks pretty good. Trying to get the hand right. The hand is an awkward pose. It can distract from the whole sculpt, so it's worth spending some time trying to get it to look a little bit better. Key is to try and make it look relaxed. The joint is kind of bothering me. Hey, how you doing? Thanks for joining me today. Just working on posing this character. If you just tuned in, I wanted to mention real quick that I, on my website, because somebody was asking about this last week. So if you go to my website, I've actually created a playlist or links to all of the videos in this series, live streams, because the ZBrush live streams are really hard to sort through. If you want to go back and watch older live streams, especially if you want to watch them in order, if you go to the Maxon YouTube page, you have to sort through them, and it's not easy. So somebody asked last week for a way to see the whole playlist for this project, and then I want to do this for previous projects too. So if you go to my website, which is bluepatone.com or artstation.bluepatone.com, either one, and you click on CG instruction, this praying mantis right here, up here at the top, I have YouTube playlists I'm going to add to this, but this is the playlist for this entire project right here, starting from the beginning. So in order, top to bottom. And I'll add today's live stream down here once it's done, and I'll keep doing that a week after week. And I'm just going to replace this page because this has a lot of really, really old stuff on it. I get rid of the old stuff and just put links to all my YouTube videos, including the ZBrush live streams. So you can go back and check those out if you are interested. I think it's nice to have an archive there. Hopefully the links won't change too much, but I just wanted to mention that for those who are just tuning in. Because I talked about it at the beginning of the live stream, and I'll mention it in the future as well. I'm just trying to get this wrist to look a little bit more natural. If it's too bent, it's going to look like she's straining. It won't look relaxed. So this is a little bit tricky. Hands are tricky because they're just as important as facial expressions. They tell a lot about what's going on in the character's mind, and if you don't spend enough time in them, they can be distracting from the rest of what you got going on in the rest of the characters. So it's worth it to spend some time. But just like facial expressions, there's a lot of subtlety to it that takes a while to kind of sort out, and that's what I'm going through right now. I mean, I think it looks okay. You know, it might also be the pose of her arm. That I'm not crazy about. It's like it's not relaxed enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to I posed this originally with Transpose Master, but now I have all these different subtools, so it's not as fast. But I just want to do slight changes, so I don't necessarily want to go back into Transpose Master. Probably could, but for right now, I just want to just adjust this a little bit. Yeah, the goal of this was to make it kind of like a fairy type character. I was kind of thinking of like, you know, an alien, but based on a treehopper. I mean, what I really wanted to do was, you know, so many insectoid creatures and characters that we see are scary and ugly because people have a fear of insects, which I don't have that fear. Some insects I like better than others. I can't stand houseflies. And no one likes mosquitoes, but tree hoppers I like. So I wanted to make sort of a alien character based on kind of a tree hopper. It looks better. It's looking more relaxed. Thinking it would be like, you know, Star Trek style character. Yeah, I think she's supposed to be sort of like an emissary or a kind, you know, sort of a princess royalty kind of character. That might make her wings even more of an extravagant gown at some point, but she's supposed to be, yeah, not scary, not creepy. Let's turn on perspective. That's better. Yeah, okay, I like that hand a little bit better. Excuse me. I have to adjust the wings a bit and a few other things, just getting that subtlety in there and kind of detailing. I need to work on this arm a little bit, make it match the other one. So sometimes when I'm working asymmetrically, I still want to be consistent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn a few things off in terms of visibility. Let's turn off the visibility of the wings. And shrink this down a little bit. And I'm going to press Shift S, which just drops a version to the canvas. So this is no longer a 3D model. It's like a 2D screen grab. And I'm just doing that so I can go in here, and as I sculpt on this arm, just try and make it sure it's consistent with the details I sculpted on there, since I'm not working with symmetry anymore. I don't mind it being asymmetrical because I think that'll look cool, but I still want to be consistent with the details, you know. I like how this is a bit rounder right there. So I'm going to pull this out. Get the old ASCII cloth out. Make this nice and round, the shoulder here. Bugs are a little bit tough because ideally you would want the bicep to be, you know, you know, you want this sort of connection with the pectoral muscles right here, but I have sort of a really defined separation there, part of the insectoid thing, but I still want it to look somewhat humanoid, so I'm kind of bringing the geometry a little bit closer together with the torso. I think it works better over here. I think it's all right. It's more robot than, well, insects are basically nature's robots, right? Maybe I can imply that there's, using the lines, sort of a connection of flow, you know, that makes sense. Yes, I think Maxon's doing a nice job these days with ZBrush. Everybody was a little bit worried when they bought ZBrush, but they've kept a lot of the same people, Paul Gabry and Ian Robinson and so on, working on it, and I think they're doing some really nice things, improving the interface, making it a little bit easier to use production tools. If you've in a production environment, if you've haven't had the chance, I recommend trying out the iPad version of ZBrush. It's really nice. It's nice to have it portable. You can load your same ZBrush projects on both iPad and the desktop, even though the interface for the iPad is very different. The same tools and projects still load, so there's a lot of times where I'll throw my ZBrush projects on a Dropbox or something like that, so that way if I'm traveling or have to go somewhere for a while and I want to do some ZBrushing, I can just download it from Dropbox and work on the iPad and vice versa. And so I've been doing a lot of scanning with the iPad, using the built-in iPad scanning tools that scan directly into ZBrush with textures and everything, and working on them, you know, while watching TV or whatever, and then I can load them up on the desktop. So the thing I like working on the iPad, but I miss my Cintiq. I have an easier time with the Cintiq than I do on the iPad. So it's nice to kind of finish off the projects here on my desktop. But otherwise, you know, it's totally compatible. It's just the difference is in the iPad, the interface is very different. It's much more streamlined. It takes a little while to get used to, but I think it makes more sense overall. You know, a lot of the problems that people have had with the ZBrush interface are being resolved in the iPad version. So it's worth checking out. This is starting to look a little bit better. I think, yeah, on this one, I kind of pulled out some of these little spikities a bit more, so let's do that. A lot of times for these bugs, the spikes, you know, they look intimidating. Many times they're there, make it easier for the bugs to crawl up trees and things like that, especially with ants. This is exoskeleton, but I'm sort of implying sort of musculature by some of these grooves that I'm drawing in here. Just something you'll see in insects, you know. This a little bit more graceful. Thanks. I'm glad you're enjoying the sculpt. I'm liking it. I think she looks pretty cool. Right now I'm getting very into the nitty-gritty with the with sort of the detailing and stuff. Okay, I just realized that I'm going over the time limit by a few minutes here, so I'm going to wrap this up for today. So here is, oh, there's her butt. Here's where she's at. Turn on the wings. And I'm going to continue to work on her, but she's almost done. So just again, just as a quick reminder, I do have a list if you want to see this project from the beginning. So far, today was episode 10. I have this on my website, so if you go to bluepatone.com or artstation.bluepatone.com, click on CG instruction. Here at the top, you'll see a YouTube playlist for this particular project, and I'll add the other ones as well. It just takes a while to sort through the archives on the ZBrush live streaming page, but you can check out the older versions if you want to see how I did any of the other parts of this particular model. So, and I'll add this one to that list as soon as I get a chance. So thanks again for joining, and I'll see you guys